It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Vermont when Sophia arrived at her older sister's Grand Lake house for Thanksgiving. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the air, and from the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect family gathering. But inside, Sophia felt the familiar chill, not from the weather, but from the people she called family. For years, she had been the quiet one, the helper, the one who sent checks, offered rides, covered emergencies no one else wanted to deal with. And yet, no matter how much she gave, it was never enough. Sophia, 38, a financial analyst and dog mom, lived alone in Boston. She wasn't flashy, but she was dependable. Too dependable, as her family saw it. Her sister Victoria, the self-proclaimed Queen Bee, had always been their mother's favorite, loud, charming, and manipulative. Meanwhile, Sophia had spent her life working hard, never asking for anything in return. This was supposed to be a holiday of gratitude, but Sophia knew something was off the moment she walked through the door. The side glances, the stiff hugs, the quiet, practiced energy of a family hiding something. And as they all sat around the table, she had no idea the betrayal that was about to unfold. Just as Sophia reached for the mashed potatoes, Victoria rose from her seat with a rehearsed smile that sent a chill down Sophia's spine. "Before we carve the turkey," Victoria began, her voice dripping with performative sweetness, "there's something we all need to say." The room stilled, forks froze midair. Sophia's heart thudded in her chest. She recognized that tone. It was the same smug tone Victoria used in high school when she lied and got Sophia suspended for a prank she didn't commit. "We've had a vote," Victoria continued, looking around the table like she was accepting an award. "And we've decided you're not family anymore." The silence was immediate, but what followed shattered Sophia's world. Cheers and clapping. Her cousin Hannah whistled like it was a football game. Uncle Matthew raised his glass and toasted, "About time." Even their mother, the woman who gave birth to her, chuckled and said, "Well, someone had to say it." Sophia sat there frozen, staring at her plate. The green beans blurred as tears threatened to surface, but her blood, it boiled. Not a single person protested. Not a single voice said, "This is wrong." Even her father, who always stayed neutral, sipped his beer and muttered, "Probably for the best." She pushed her chair back slowly. "Wow," she said, barely able to contain the tremble in her voice. "You actually rehearsed this." Victoria's grin widened. "You've been toxic for years, Soph. We're just finally done pretending." "Toxic?" Sophia echoed, the word hitting like a slap. "You mean not financially useful anymore?" Her mother reached for the cranberry sauce, as if they were discussing the weather. "It's unanimous." Sophia scanned the room. No one would meet her eyes. People she had paid bills for, driven across state lines, helped out of debt. They all looked away. And in that moment, something inside her clicked. "Good," she said softly, reaching under the table for her leather tote. "I figured this might happen." She pulled out a thick, navy blue folder, the kind lawyers used for court cases, and set it in the center of the table with a solid thunk. The room fell dead silent. Even the fireplace seemed to crackle more quietly. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "What's that?" "Why don't you find out?" Sophia leaned back, arms crossed. Victoria grabbed the folder with one manicured hand, still smirking. But as she opened it, the color drained from her face. Her eyes scanned page after page, her expression shifting from smug to horrified. Then the scream. It was sharp, raw, animalistic. Chairs scraped as she shot to her feet, knocking over her wine. "You monster!" she shrieked. "You twisted freak!" Her husband, Elliot, snatched the folder from her hands, flipping through the pages, his face turning gray. "Is this real?" he asked Sophia. She nodded slowly. Every word, every transaction, every receipt. The table went dead silent. Even the dog, Buddy, stopped begging for scraps. "You thought I'd always stay quiet," she said, her voice calm and sharp as glass. "But guess what? I brought the truth." and it's heavier than you thought." Elliot stood frozen, his hand trembling, as he flipped another page in the thick folder. The sound of paper rustling was the only noise in the room. All the color had drained from his face. "Is this?" he asked again, his voice low and cracking. "Is this all true?" Sophia didn't even blink. "It's all real. Every dollar, every text, every time you came to me with your hands out." Across the table, their mother looked like she was about to faint. Her fork fell with a clink onto the porcelain plate. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if trying to form words she no longer had. Sophia turned toward Victoria, who was still standing, her face white, her body trembling. She had always been the showrunner, the one who controlled the narrative. Not tonight. "You were so sure I wouldn't fight back," Sophia said, rising slowly from her chair. "So sure I'd stay the doormat, the ATM, the one person you could count on to clean up your mess without ever saying a word." Victoria's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You had no right to dig into my life," she snapped. This is a violation." Sophia tilted her head slightly. "You stood up and declared me not family, remember? You wanted me out, and I came prepared." Elliot suddenly paused on a specific page. His eyes narrowed. "What is this about Santa Barbara?" he asked, holding the paper out to Victoria. "Hotel charges on my credit card. With someone named Alyssa?" The name hit the room like a grenade. Victoria's eyes shot to his. "Don't start," she hissed. "This isn't the time." Elliot cut her off. 3 nights, spa services, room service for 2. Who the hell is Alyssa? Sophia didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation. "That's enough," their mother finally cried, standing halfway before sinking back down. "Can't we all just calm down and be civil?" Sophia turned to her, voice steady but sharp. "You called me a parasite in an email while cashing the check I sent to cover your credit card debt. Was that civil?" Her mother gasped. We were under stress." "No," Sophia snapped. "I was under stress while you all drained me dry." Her father, who had remained painfully silent the entire time, finally spoke up, his tone weary. "You're making this bigger than it has to be." Sophia turned to him, her eyes cold. "I'm finally telling the truth, and none of you can handle it." Victoria lunged toward the folder, again, as if snatching it would erase the past. "You're pathetic, dramatic. You think this makes you the victim?" "No," Sophia said calmly. "I think it makes me finally free." Elliot stood up, still holding the folder. "Is all of this true, Victoria? Did you lie to me too?" For once, she had no answer. No defense, just silence. And in that silence, everything changed. The silence in the room was deafening. Sophia stood tall now, no longer the invisible support beam her family leaned on without ever seeing. She stared at the people who once called her too sensitive for speaking up, too cold for saying no, and too selfish for daring to put herself first. "You lied to me," Elliot said again to Victoria, his voice breaking. He held the folder like it was toxic, like it had burned a hole straight through every illusion he'd built around their marriage. "You told me Sophia was unstable. You said she made up stories. You said she was manipulating you." Victoria opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her eyes darted around the table, looking for someone to come to her defense. No one moved. "You all knew," Sophia said, turning toward the rest of the family. "You saw it happen, year after year. The jokes, the guilt trips, the passive-aggressive digs. You watched me bleed myself dry for this family, and none of you said a damn thing." Her father lowered his eyes. "I helped every one of you," she continued. $78,000 in 5 years. I paid for surgeries, college tuition, therapy bills, credit card debt, even your vacation to the Bahamas, Aunt Lily. A vacation you said was for a medical emergency. Lily flinched. Her fork dropped from her hand. "You all took and took until there was nothing left of me but my bank balance and your expectations." Victoria sneered. "You're just mad that no one needs you anymore." Sophia's voice dropped, firm and unshakable. "Wrong. I'm not mad. I'm done." Her words landed like stone. Not in anger, but in clarity. For the first time, they weren't hearing a desperate plea or a guilt-laden whisper. They were hearing her voice, clear, bold, and unmoved. "You act like I betrayed you," she said. "But the only thing I ever did was stop being your wallet. You chose to help." Victoria spat. "No one forced you." "And yet," Sophia replied, stepping forward, "you all expected it. Every single time. Until helping wasn't generosity anymore. It was obligation. It was duty. It was expected silence." Elliot, still standing, looked at his wife. "Is it true? You used me too?" Victoria's silence was his answer. Sophia turned to her mother one last time. "You always said family sticks together, but you only believed that when I was writing checks. Now that I've said no, suddenly I'm toxic. Funny how that works." Her mother wiped a tear. "We may have gone too far, but we're still family." "No," Sophia said, voice steady, final. "You voted me out, remember?" And with that, she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a second envelope, and placed it on the table. Power of attorney revoked. Emergency contact removed. Legal ties cut. She looked at each of them, one by one. "I am no longer your safety net. I am no longer your scapegoat. I am no longer your victim. I'm finally living my life, for me." When Sophia walked out of that lake house, the cold November air didn't bite. It cleansed her. Behind her, a family sat stunned in their curated perfection. Plates full of untouched food and ugly truths. For years, they had used guilt and obligation to keep her tethered. But that night, she had cut the cord. She didn't drive home right away. Instead, she pulled off onto a quiet overlook by Maplewood Lake, a spot her father once took her as a child to fish. She hadn't been back in years. Now, alone under a sky dotted with stars, she finally let the weight fall from her shoulders. And she didn't cry. She exhaled. There were no calls the next day, no angry voicemails, no sudden apologies, just peace. A peace so unfamiliar, it felt like a stranger she wanted to keep around. On the third day, the messages began. First, her mother. "We were angry, but we're still family." Then Victoria. "You don't even realize what you've done." Elliot's filing for divorce. Later, her father. "You went too far. Your mother is a wreck. Come fix this." But Sophia didn't respond. She slept. Deeply. For the first time in a decade, she didn't flinch at every buzz of her phone. She stopped checking her bank account in fear. The anxiety that had once wrapped itself around her like a second skin was gone. A week later, she did something bold. She applied for a new job in another city. Not because she was running from something, but because, for once, she was running towards something. Freedom. No more. "Stay close. Who'll take care of us if you leave?" No more. "What will we do without you?" They would figure it out, or they wouldn't. It was no longer her responsibility. With the move came other changes. Sophia reconnected with old friends, people she had distanced herself from because her family always needed her. She told them the truth. Some had already seen the story online. They didn't judge, they supported. One friend wrote, "You didn't lose your family, you escaped a trap." She started doing small things she had always put off. Morning jogs, fresh-cut flowers for her new apartment, learning how to cook for one, and loving it. She updated her emergency contact forms, replacing her parents with her best friend, Aria, someone who had never once asked her for a dime, only for her time. Sophia even began therapy, not because she was broken, but because she finally had permission to heal. For years, her life was about maintaining their comfort. Now it was about building her own. Each session peeled away the layers of guilt and revealed something stunning underneath. A woman who had always been enough, but never allowed to believe it. And just like that, her story wasn't about survival anymore. It was about becoming. Sophia had always believed that love meant sacrifice, and family meant never saying no. That was the script she'd been handed. But as the weeks passed in her new city, she realized something that shook her. She had spent most of her life being everyone's emergency plan and no one's priority. Now, for the first time in 38 years, she was writing her own story. Each morning, Sophia woke up with purpose, not to check her family's messages or stress over late-night money requests, but to breathe, stretch, run, and live. She brewed her coffee slowly. She read books she had once shelved to deal with everyone else's chaos. She even started taking a pottery class on Sunday mornings, something she'd dreamed of in her 20s but never pursued because back then, there was always something urgent to cover. In therapy, she unpacked decades of pain. Her therapist, a kind but direct woman named Dr. Reyes, helped her name things she'd never dared admit before: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, conditional love. Each session was like turning on a light in a room she'd been sitting in the dark for years. And in that light, she began to see herself, not as a burden, not as a bank, not as the weird single one, but as someone worthy, strong, and whole. One afternoon, while organizing her new apartment, she found a dusty old photo album tucked in the bottom of a moving box. Inside were pictures of family gatherings from her childhood, holidays, birthdays, graduations. In almost every photo, Sophia was in the background, either holding someone else's coat, taking the picture, or not there at all. She smiled softly, not in sadness, but in recognition. "That's over now," she whispered to no one in particular. "I'm done being the backdrop." The shift wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Sophia's posture changed. Her voice carried more weight when she spoke. Her laughter came easier, no longer guarded by caution or shame. Strangers complimented her energy. Friends noticed the difference. "You look lighter," one said, and she was. She didn't flinch when the holidays approached. She didn't brace for emotional blackmail. Instead, she booked a solo trip to Oregon's coast, rented a tiny cottage, and spent Christmas morning walking barefoot on the sand, a scarf around her shoulders, her dog Buddy chasing the waves beside her. No noise, no guilt, no drama, just peace. One night, months after Thanksgiving, she received a text from Laura, her cousin, the same one who had clapped when Sophia was voted out. "I read the folder. I didn't know the half of it. I'm sorry." Sophia didn't respond. She didn't need to. That version of her, the one that needed closure from everyone else, was gone. She had made peace, not because they apologized, but because she stopped waiting for it. The apology she really needed was her own. "I'm sorry I made you carry all that alone." And Sophia? She forgave herself, fully. Because in the end, she wasn't broken. She was finally free. By spring, Sophia was no longer the quiet, overlooked woman sitting at the edge of fake family gatherings. Now, she lived in a new city, in a small sunlit apartment, and there were no more midnight money requests. She woke up early, brewed her coffee slowly, went for walks with her dog Buddy, and most importantly, she finally learned to live for herself. Instead of funding a thankless family, Sophia spent her time helping women who had been hurt like her, teaching them financial independence and how to stand on their own 2 feet. One day, Victoria texted, "We miss you." Sophia stared at the message. No anger, no sadness, just peace. She knew they didn't miss her. They missed the version of her who stayed silent and paid the bills. And when someone asked, "Do you regret cutting them off?" Sophia smiled and said, "I only regret not walking away sooner." Sophia's story teaches us one of the hardest but most powerful truths. You don't owe your life to people who only love you when you're useful. For years, she gave everything, her time, her money, her emotional energy, because she believed that's what family meant. But family without respect is just another form of control. When Sophia finally said, "Enough," it wasn't out of anger, it was out of survival. She chose to stop being the fixer, the bank, the scapegoat, and chose herself instead. And in doing so, she didn't lose a family, she found peace. If you've ever felt trapped by guilt or held hostage by the word family, let this be your permission to choose yourself. Walking away doesn't make you heartless, it makes you whole. Protecting your peace is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Love that demands silence, sacrifice, and endless giving without care for your well-being isn't love at all. Whether it's parents, siblings, or lifelong friends, you have the right to say no, to choose distance, to start again. And like Sophia, you may discover that peace isn't found in a full house or loud dinner table. It's found in finally hearing your own voice. The strongest love is the one you give to yourself when everyone else stops giving it to you. So if you're still asking, was I wrong to walk away? Maybe ask instead, was I ever truly seen when I stayed? If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.